Five Nights at Freddy's has always had an interesting relationship with its villains. Starting in Fnaf 1, the primary antagonists were the animatronics themselves, but they were posed as sympathetic ones. They were victims, murdered children haunting the suits. Naturally, once it came time for the real villain to show, he was the one behind their deaths, a man named William Afton. William Afton, also known as Springtrap, was both a very successful villain for the franchise, is still extremely popular, and is unfortunately where FNAF's issues with villains began. He was introduced to us in minigames, showing his many terrible acts before properly appearing trapped and fused with the suit he had been using for these acts for so long, the Spring Bonnie suit. A fitting appearance. Keeping this section brief, Springtrap was very effective. The backstory of his crimes, the progression of how he was spring-locked, his disturbing, rotten body now combined with an animatronic, his hulking, human-like motions and alarmingly aware eyes. Springtrap worked. William Afton worked, and people ate him up. Maybe a little too much, as something peculiar happened. It happened in both the games and the books. William Afton started to change. In FNAF 1-4 in the Silver Eyes book, Afton was portrayed as a murderer who killed for the thrill and for the joy of creating monsters. Sister Location introduced us to a new side of William Afton, as an animatronic-making genius who managed to make a slew of killer robots under the noses of everyone both working for and with him and elsewise. In the books, William was soon revealed to actually be a mad scientist who was really killing kids to try and gain immortality, and in Pizzeria Simulator, Springtrap returns as Afton, or Scraptrap, in a largely different suit and with a slew of dark and edgy lines to accompany him.
What a deceptive calling. I knew it was a lie the moment I heard it, obviously, but it is intriguing nonetheless. Fascinating. What they have become. That was easier than I thought it would be.
Emphasizing how clever and cruel he is. And he just kept coming back. His tagline, "I always come back," turned out to be a curse. And not the cool kind like Ganondorf, but the kind where every time Afton returns, he not only feels like a different character, but it takes away more of what made Springtrap initially great. Now, my belief, and the reason William Afton is so important to this video, is that these many changes were due to an interest in changing FNAF's story and adding in different themes and plot points and threats, but wanting to cling to the same villain. Like, let's have a mad scientist villain. Well, let's just make it Afton. Let's give Afton these lines so everyone knows how dark and evil he is. Let's redesign him to look more like a skeleton, to look cooler, despite the fact that now he's definitely not the Springtrap we recall. The books portray it best as Afton goes from a deranged killer with a warped view of the world, to a mastermind who actually wanted to get Springlocked, this was all part of his plan, to being still alive and getting out of Springtrap because this was all his genius plan to create magic goo to keep him alive forever. I think I've made my point, but instead of switching villains, FNAF clung to Afton as long as humanly possible. This is very apparent from the first new villain that was introduced, Circus Baby. Circus Baby was a creation of William's built to kidnap and kill kids, who was possessed by his daughter, who was accidentally killed when he wasn't watching her. Circus Baby was the first truly malicious animatronic. She was aware and manipulative, cold, and pretended to be friendly just to get what she needed to survive. However, on the other hand, she also had a very tragic backstory. Even after her death, she was forced to perform and kill, and shocked repeatedly whenever she stepped out of line. She was trapped, and she wanted freedom, and she was willing to go through anyone to get it. Unfortunately, by the next game, Circus Baby's role as the new big bad was cut dramatically short. The amalgam she and her band had become, Ennard, was broken apart, and Baby herself became subservient to Afton, just wanting to make him happy despite the fact that in Sister Location, she thought she was targeting William, as per Michael's words, and gutted him.
They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you.
This character change was not a progression of Baby's own, but instead to remind us who the real big bad was, Afton. We couldn't have two villains out for their own goals. Baby had to be beneath Afton. This ended up shooting itself in the foot, as Baby was the best chance the franchise had at budding off into new villains, and it wasn't taken. The cause of both William Afton's juggling and Baby's changes is the same one. It was to give the series more villain archetypes without giving them more villains, instead relying on the ones they had, likely due to William's popularity. This instead backfired, as it made William, who was still popular no doubt, maybe a little less credible. At least there were a lot more memes made about him after this. So Fnaf was going to have to get a new villain eventually. It set fire to the old ones and brought in the new. And there came Glitchtrap. Now, I will not get into the debate on whether Glitchtrap is actually William or is a clone of him, because I think it is pointless. It doesn't matter if Glitchtrap is William. By all accounts, he is William. That is, he is everything William was. A man in a rabbit suit luring children into the back room, one who is constantly intertwined with Afton's notable crime, the missing children incident, who dances around and possesses people and hacks databases, and apparently came off of an old piece of equipment, all but confirmed to be from the pizzeria where Afton was burned to death. Again, its spiritual form being a massive rabbit amalgam, which William is said to have become in the books that came out around the same time, and even has the tagline, "I always come back." So it doesn't matter if Glitchtrap is or isn't Afton's spirit or is a clone. He is still filling virtually the same role as William Afton. So Afton was replaced by another Afton. The new villain was the same as the old. Glitchtrap didn't do much, really. But Glitchtrap's importance really comes from the fact that he is the direct cause of the actual new villains coming into the fold. Since William Afton's retirement, we've had contenders coming up to take his role. And the two main ones are Vanny, a young woman possessed by the essence of Afton who takes on his role as a bunny suit-clad maniac, and the Mimic, a creature that just straight up believes it is Afton sometimes. Let's start with Vanny. As portrayed in Help Wanted, Vanny was a VR tech who ended up getting possessed by Glitchtrap while trying to purge him from Fazbear Entertainment's new video game. By security breach, she dons a white rabbit suit and starts terrorizing the Pizzaplex. But you wouldn't know that from playing the game. Despite her picture being on the box, all over the marketing, in so much merch, and being featured in many of the endings, Vanny herself barely does anything in Security Breach. Her other half, who is never confirmed but is most definitely her, Vanessa, is also barely in the game. They blip in and out of the story. They appear only like twice each. There's notes saying they hacked their way into the building, and Gregory, the kid we play as, casually mentions that children have gone missing, meaning Vanny is kidnapping and likely killing children. But it's just not in the game due to major cuts and censorship. Yes, Vanny was censored. Often portrayed as having a kitchen knife, by time the game came out there was no knife to speak of. Vanny just skipped around without anything at all. The game also censored its only mentioning of blood when Gregory cuts his arm, leading to people believing he was a robot. These cuts are so egregious that when the game came out, she had only one functional line during encounters, so she would skip around repeatedly asking, "Are you having fun yet?" A multitude of lines were cut from her and Vanessa, and every single cutscene of her shown in the initial trailer was cut before release. The two are even missing from the well-animated intro and final ending cutscenes. And what's worse is that this didn't stop with Security Breach. Security Breach was rushed. Okay, it happens. But what's Help Wanted 2's excuse? Help Wanted 2 is, by all accounts, a completely finished game, during which Vanny, who was believed to have been saved and cured, returns into the fold. Once again, a multitude of her lines, and lines from Mystic Hippo that seemed to be from her, were cut. But there's also something even more devious. So in the game, Glitchtrap is around doing stuff. You can find these secret memory dolls relating to Afton's old victims. You need these to get the Vanny ending. But for some reason, Glitchtrap holds them out to you, even though this ending is how you defeat him. Except, he wasn't supposed to. In the files, you can apparently find where there was supposed to be Vanny's hands and were changed to Glitchtrap's. Why? I can only assume to make the ending more shocking, but I remember the immediate response to the ending of Vanny's return and destruction of Glitchtrap, and it was, huh? What's that mean? Not a raging, wow, Vanny was back. Tetrabit Gaming covered this, so I'd check out their video for more details. Basically, Vanny was promoted as a new villain and used as a poster child for merch and advertisements, but then was never used to any degree. She was basically another circus baby, built to be a new villain, but then cast by the wayside for more important ones. So despite the fact that Help Wanted 2 teases that Vanny might be making a grand return, there's not much to get excited about. And then there's the Mimic, a character all but shadow dropped into the story and is now being posed as being everyone and behind everything unwarrantedly. So Mimic is an endoskeleton who, so far, seems to compulsively mimic whomever it comes in contact with. It is not confirmed, but alluded to being Burntrap at the end of Security Breach, the creature that was either Afton or mimicking him. Other than that, Mimic's only hints have been ones so vague that they were often penned to other characters before now being given to him, and are still not directly connected. And that counts for all of Mimic. Mimic is a piecemeal creation through and through, taking the gimmicks of numerous other characters to form this underwhelming amalgam. It takes Innard's ability to mimic voices, change its shape to fit into human bodies, and design of being pieced of mismatched parts. Note, Mimic basically is just what if Innard wasn't canned. It also borrows the mimicking persona of Eleanor, a mimicking character from the books. Its backstory in the short stories is a slightly altered version of Circus Baby Hot Charlie's from the book trilogy, and like Vanny, it is believed to be following in Afton's footsteps. It is also believed to be Glitchtrap in a convoluted way that I will not cover because I don't care. See, a lot of what Mimic isn't even shown or told. It's people filling in pieces to make this character more than he is. So what is he? Weak. Introduced in Ruin, Mimic is mimicking Gregory to lure in Cassie to help free him. He does a terrible job at it, but Cassie believes him because she's a little kid. He needs her because he got cemented up in the basement like the cast of Amontillado, and after she frees him, he drops the guise and begins to slowly chase her through some tunnels, either wearing a stitched-together mascot suit or nothing at all. Then he either gets his arm lopped off in an elevator or unberthed from his suit by a scooper. And that's pretty much all we've seen of Mimic, unless you want to directly pretend he's someone else. So like Vanny, he's supposed to be this threatening villain, but we just don't see it, and what we do see is, well, it's not that much. He is just an endoskeleton, and unlike some characters with a slim build who still look threatening, this guy does not with that baby face. His reveal is predictable, his presence is entirely imagined, and once again, it doesn't matter what I said. At his core, he is Afton replacement, a guy in a suit tricking and killing kids and killing people for no particular reason. The books also portray him as this Terminator creature that just runs around killing people in brutal ways in the dumbest fashion. Like teenagers break into the Pizzaplex and he just kinda runs into the room, kills one brutally, walks off, waits for another one to separate. It feels like it's trying to reflect on classic horror movie tropes, but it's this thing, this schmuck who had to get a little girl just to help him out of the basement. Now for the books, I am not covering them right now, but if you want to know about the Mimic's appearance in them, buy the Tales from the Pizzaplex box set, read the whole thing, and then pick and choose which parts of Mimic's occasionally inconsistent story you want to remember, and keep in mind that likely none of it might get into the games. Okay, so, Vanny and the Mimic. Both of these characters were created to replace Afton and have been batted back and forth to little success, largely because they are in one vein or the other clones of Afton who are simply not doing anything. Vanny is Girl Afton, Mimic is Robot Afton, but the games don't seem very interested in actually showing them doing anything. And that could be from cuts and censors, but there's not much of an attempt to work around it. Even when given a chance to have these two play a bigger role, it's not taken. Vanny was cut from Security Breach for the most part, and the final boss was Burntrap, who is maybe supposed to be the Mimic now, and then Mimic took over in Ruin as Vanny was saved, except in Help Wanted 2 implies that Glitchtrap's been destroyed and Vanny still exists, and now these two are both active players. Kind of like what they had started with Afton and Baby, just a whole lot messier. Vanny's no baby, and Mimic only wishes he was Afton. And while Fnaf was having trouble getting Vanny and Mimic to work, and if you want my opinion, floundering them both with 2 left feet and no thumbs, it ended up creating the perfect next step villain entirely unintentionally. One who, while sharing shades of what made William initially creepy, doesn't share his exact gimmicks, has a different MO, a totally different story, and wasn't just another thing in a bunny suit. And that villain was the Daycare Attendant. The Daycare Attendant is, as the name implies, the attendant in the Superstar Daycare at the Pizzaplex, but you likely know them more as Sun and Moon, and you probably know them due to their large, thriving fan base. While the fan headcanons of Sun and Moon are marginally different now, I'll be going straight off of their canon in-game versions. Sun is a stressed-out, nervous wreck who compulsively hovers, gets extremely huffy about children's art projects, and acts generally like... Well, the best comparison I fall back on is a Squidward pretending to be a SpongeBob. He gives off the illusion of bubbliness, but underneath it is something cynical and fed up.
You can stop throwing things now. Oh, that was only funny the first few times. Do it again, and you're taking a nap.
And this is because Sun is in a constant state of panic over his eventual turn into Moon, his other half, as Sun puts it, the other me.
Are you done yet? Why are you taking so long? Can't work in the dark. Don't work in the dark. Never work in the dark. You'll hurt your eyes if you work in the dark. Whatever you do, keep the lights on.
When the lights go out, Sun's body shifts and Moon takes over. Moon is aggressive, maniacal, mischievous, and way too agile for his own good, easily able to flip his body to crawl and squeeze into any space. He likes dealing out punishment generously.
It's past your bedtime. Naughty.
Sun is constantly fighting Moon off, but eventually Moon comes out and starts causing problems for the both of them. While Sun and Moon are often regarded as 2 completely separate personalities, Help Wanted 2 really blurred the lines between them as we see Sun speaking like Moon when he gets upset, his voice edging into his. Indeed, with Help Wanted 2's many reveals, it's pretty clear that Sun and Moon are in a possessed state similar to Vanessa and Vanny. Moon is Sun's Glitchtrap hacked other half, which explains his cut but similar animations to him, hints in his minigame, and the fact that Vanny is controlling him during the ending of Help Wanted 2. This is what truly turns the Daycare Attendant from a one-off threat to an actually effective villain. There's many more facets to what he is. It's not just he turns evil when the lights go out. It's he turns, but also there's this exhausted and frustrating person existing on top of that, this type of person who would very well snap at any time. Not to mention his abilities. The Daycare Attendant is extremely agile and from cut animations is capable of climbing on the walls. Few animatronics can actively climb walls in current day. In fact, Moon can do a lot of things that Mimic is supposed to do, except we actually see them. Also, let me get the books out of the way real quick so I can get less comments telling me about them. One of the mini books say he is a theater robot, but it is a little nonsensical. Apparently there's a bunch of pizzaplexes, like hundreds of them. Every Sun and Moon ever, often mistakenly called Moondrop by the way, was taken out of a random theater and put into a daycare without being fixed, even though there's supposedly hundreds of pizzaplexes and so hundreds of daycare attendants. Also, it implies that Moon was always evil and never possessed, which is discredited directly by Cassie's lines in Ruin, which imply that Moon wasn't always like this, and Vanny literally controlling Moon as a puppet. But, of course, this was from the sexy anime girl story, which is considered the most game-accurate one for some reason. Likely because it straight up steals scenes from the games to pad its length. Yeah, they couldn't reach those 2 parts without a little skimming. Likely the reason people believe it's real is because Sun and Moon do have theater theming, totally ignoring the fact that the Fazbear Theater was already in the daycare and that it was likely used to inspire the book, not the other way around. In fact, the theater they came from was likely the Fazbear Theater, written by someone who kinda just glossed over a map of the location and went off of that. See, like the character encyclopedia that had Henry's page just be one cutscene and nothing else, or the stories that inaccurately portray animatronics like they don't know anything about them, yeah, I'm not too trusting of the books. Whenever you wonder if the books are entirely canon, remember that the fandom was willing to believe Glamrock Foxy was confirmed due to a misread of a leaked book saying that he was in an arcade cabinet alongside Orville the elephant. TLDR, the books are only as important as you want them to be. Back to the actual video and the point of the video. So while struggling getting Vanny and Mimic to really do anything credible, the daycare attendant was getting much less screen time and somehow blowing both out of the water. Well, actually, I think he got more screen time than both combined, really. But that's not a high bar to set. Unintentionally becoming the better villain. See, compared to Vanny and Mimic, the daycare attendant initially seems to be a good side act to the oh-so-scary kitty strangling rabbit wearing big boss. But look for any amount of time and you realize that the daycare attendant actually outdoes the two in every avenue. Starting with Help Wanted 2 managing to showcase something the daycare attendant has that neither Vanny nor Mimic have: versatility. Ever wonder why Moon is in so many minigames in Help Wanted 2? Well, actually not that many, just like 3, 4 if you count Jacko Moon. Because the daycare attendant is very versatile. He can climb easily, move easily, twist his body up and fit into most spaces. If you need someone on the ceiling, circling a carousel, hiding behind a ticket booth, crawling through a vent, climbing down a fire escape upside down, Moon can do it. Character-wise he will, body-wise he's capable. Vanny is just a human. Possessed or not, all she can do is skip, do a little dance, and not wield a knife. And even then, she really doesn't ever do anything anyway. You would have to be very sparing with your use of her lest you see how withheld she is, because at the end of the day, she's just a chick in a rabbit suit, and as a chick myself, I could take her. I would fight dirty. Mimic might be a robot, but he's as stiff as all get out. He walks like frickin' Frankenstein, and despite him supposedly being able to fit into any suit, in practice he seems awkward and unwieldy. He doesn't come off as the type who could contort as easily as Moon can. If he can, it's going to take a while. It's like the Emmys from Metroid. Mimic's the broken one that looks creepy but can't do anything. Moon's one of the colorful ones with the flat faces that doesn't look as dangerous but kills on contact and lets you kick really hard. When it comes to design, Moon is also much more effectively scary and visibly dangerous than Vanny or Mimic. He looks uncanny and creepy, and moves in a way to match. He cackles and sneers, he spins his head. He's doing some really off-putting stuff. Vanny's mask looks somewhat creepy, but she doesn't move in a creepy way. There were some cut animations of her walking with a tilted head in an almost zombie-like fashion, but in the final game she's got skipping, goofy run, and a lot of motions that are way too human to give the illusion across. Mimic is, like I said, the stiffest thing since they had to give oil to the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz. Get this thing some WD-40. He just kind of shuffles around and does seem to be strong, but also slow. At least slow enough. And there's the contrast, because I could believe that Moon would be stronger than the average human, but I can barely believe the Mimic's capable of climbing up a flight of stairs. Character-wise, Sun and Moon are much more fleshed out, and that's kind of funny to say because they share the same sort of possession who is in control shtick as Vanny. But the problem is, we don't see Vanny's battle with it at all. We see Vanessa acting like a pill, but other than that, we just see blips and at this point can't even piece together what she thinks about all of this. This is also why Sun and Moon have a better sympathetic backstory, because we're actively seeing it. Mimic just mimics, except sometimes he's a gaslighter with an attitude problem. Unless Help Trap is Glitchtrap, not Mimic, which is very possible, in which case Mimic has no personality except Mimic. And above all else, the daycare attendant does something I mentioned earlier and will mention again. He is separated just enough from William Afton that he doesn't feel like a replacement. The idea of this real person, in this case a jaded adult, a stranger, inside of a child-friendly suit, getting too close to the kids. When you think of it that way, the DA is downright terrifying. Too human to be all robot, too robot to be totally human. It works. It works in a way Mimic does not because, well, for one, we actually see him doing stuff and he's actually scary. And because he is actually the one who is effective at blending into society and getting close to kids. He is the greater danger, and yet he is sympathetic because Sun is really trying to keep this thing at bay. This isn't the boogeyman parents look under the bed for. This is the weird man at the library who stares at you a little too long. There is something both so goofily uncanny and really uncomfortable about what Moon is. And guess what? William Afton, too, was his scariest when he was that. A man in a suit. Not a mastermind, not a god, not a scientist, but somebody, anybody, who is able to get close to his prey and disappear. The thing is, the problem is, I don't think Fnaf can do it. I don't think the daycare attendant would be as good as he is if he was originally intended to be the villain during conception, because Fnaf wouldn't have been able to resist making him another Afton, or a creation of Afton, or a mimic of Afton. The possessed aspect, I can handle that, but if he was the actual villain, there'd be something added in to make this, to take all the credibility out. Moon being possessed by Vanny at least gives an amount of free will, as if he is hacked and got loose, maybe because Vanny cut from Glitchtrap, he could be a genuine threat. So, should the daycare attendant be the next villain? Well, sure, he's working, why not keep him around a little longer? I think if Help Wanted 2's story did anything, it was just show how much better the daycare attendant fits as a villain compared to Vanny and Mimic. Mimic not even showing up, and Vanny popping up at the last 2 minutes. Meanwhile, Moon's doing double overtime. He's entering maximum overdrive. He's popping up all over the place. But he's capable of doing so. And you know what? It's about time we had a villain that could actually do something, you know? And to any fans concerned that making him a villain will cause you or anyone else to hate the character or ruin the fan interpretations, it won't. In fact, it'll make him more popular. People love villains. They love villains they sympathize with. They love villains they don't. It would just guarantee more Sun and Moon in the future, and that's a win for any fan. I mean, I myself am a big fan of the Sun and Moon daycare attendant, and while I was on board with him being like a companion or a good guy, I'm not against an elevation into villain territory. I'd rather a character I liked became a villain than get stuck with a couple of villains I don't really care about, you know? Either that or he's revealed to be the puppet, you know, one or the other. Ah, well, you know how it is. Hope in one hand and go in the other and see which one fills up faster, you know what I mean? I guess the point of this video was to make a video airing my grievances about the Mimic and not calling it I don't like the Mimic because I was kind of nervous about talking smack about the Mimic after I got so many hot takes of people saying that the Mimic fanbase was really ravenous. Or maybe I made this video because I had suddenly a lot of Sun and Moon footage and I wanted to put them to good use. Or maybe I just wanted to talk about the Sun and Moon again. There we go, that's the thing. There's one point to them being a good villain, at least they're worth talking about, or I find that I like talking about them. But, you know, it is how it is. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching.